panel that I think you're going to really look forward to the discussion. The topic or the title is Automation and Digital Services, Innovating the Enterprise. But before we get into that, let us watch this IDB video.
How to seize the AI move with intelligence? Artificial intelligence can improve Latin America and the Caribbean's productivity. It can provide scalable solutions to talent shortages and enhance digital services segments in which the region already excels, particularly health tech, ag tech, and fintech. This can boost the region's GDP over 5% in less than a decade. To tap into its full potential, LAC needs to face the challenge of upskilling its workforce and ensure adequate technological infrastructure. Let's take advantage of digital opportunities to expand globally.
Founder and CEO of Supply Wisdom out of the territory USA. He will be our moderator for this segment. Let us welcome him. And joining him as our esteemed panelists, we have Steve Rotherham, Head of Global Business Services Carrier, US, Manjit Singh, SVP GM, NOC RealPage Inc., US, and Vishal Aluwalia, Founder and CEO of Keeper AI, US. So I'm going to hand it over to Atul. Gentlemen, have a great discussion.
All right, this is the King Kong of all sessions. Santiago, you're in the room? So let me start with a question. What is the hottest programming language today? What's the hottest programming language today? English. ChatGPT was launched on November 30th, 2022, right? Literally not even 7 months ago. There's over 10 million queries a day today. Another generative AI tool called Claude in May was able to now read a novel, which is usually about 75,000 words, in a minute. In a minute. When they changed the Great Gatsby, the key character, Mr. Carraway, to a software engineer, it detected the change in Great Gatsby in 22 seconds. So what we have done today is assembled a panel that includes a technologist, a banker turned startup, and what I would call a guru of outsourcing. And all these are both users and in many cases creator of automation and AI. And so I want to do a brief introduction before I start asking them questions. On my left is Steve Rotherham. Steve is the head of global business services for Carrier. So when you see air conditioning units on trucks, in big industrial units, and of course in homes, hopefully it reminds you of Carrier. He was also the head of global business services at AkzoNobel, Kellogg, and prior to that had great outsourcing career at GE, Genpact, and Accenture. Steve, welcome. In fact, this morning, Steve was at a supplier in Jamaica because he is leveraging resources, amazing talent from the place where we are here today. Yep. Please, yes. Sitting next to Steve is Manjit Singh. Manjit, I met Manjit over 10 years ago. He's been a chief information officer at amazing companies like Toyota, North America, Clorox, Las Vegas Sands, and many others. And today is a general manager of an innovative real estate company, NOC, at RealPage, and also serves on a number of different boards like Upstream Security and others, and has been both a user and now, of course, as part of a startup, or not really a startup, but a tech company leveraging AI and tech. Welcome, Manjit. And our final panelist, who seems to be shifting away from us for some reason, from tea plantations in India to working at organizations like JP Morgan, led sourcing tech automation initiatives, and also at companies like Unisys, Capgemini, and others. Vishal is now the CEO of a HR startup that's leveraging AI called Keeper AI and trying to help corporations and employees really work better together in a hybrid world. So let me begin by the way, first of all, applause for Vishal. Thank you. So over the last 2 days, almost every panel has talked about AI and the fears of AI, but what I want to do really is try to get us sharing with the audience in terms of how can you take advantage of it. So Steve, let me start with you. Very clearly, as I was talking about the pace of change, right? ChatGPT launched in November 30, over 200 million users, 10 million queries a day. And guess what? By another month, it'll probably be 15 million queries a day, and version 5 is going to be released. How do you keep track of all these evolving technologies? And what advice do you have for the audience, and how do you keep up with it?
Yeah, as a user, I think the most important thing is, excuse me, demystify it. Usually when I meet technologists, they try and tell me how much they know, instead of asking, what is it that we need to solve for? So you've always got to make it as basic as possible. As far as keeping up with kind of like what's happening, that takes me down a path of getting with a partner who understands the business. They can help with that piece. I think on the flip side, for me and my team personally, what we've done is we've done reverse mentoring. So what we've got, each person has a mentor who is under 27 years old. And we ask them to tell us what's going on, because they're the people that are so connected with it and help the old guys with what can you do, what is the art of the possible, and what's the latest tool for us to use. So my request as a user is keep it as simple as possible, align it to the business needs, don't try and sell the technology, and that'll keep us engaged.
Right, so Steve, you talked about the art of the possible, and Vishal, as we were talking about it, often it seems kind of overwhelming, right? Claude, there's ChatGPT, there's version GPT-4, and all those. Talk to us about what's good practice about how do you experiment, how do you even think about start leveraging some of these tools that are available? Because some of them are available for literally no cost or very little cost.
Yeah, thanks Atul. So I've been fortunate embarking in an AI journey way back when I was in UBS, 2010. And then at JP Morgan, we looked at the whole onboarding process and client interaction. But before that, if you look at the last 3 years, what has happened, the whole dynamics, the way we do business has changed, right? Demands of supply chain have pressurized us. There has been a lack of human capital, and customers are itching to see new products and different way to interact, right? AI is going to remain, so let's not discuss the good and the bad, it's going to remain. It is nothing but augmenting your human knowledge to a different level. But what is more important before you start this journey is the data. Where is the data stored? It is structured or unstructured? How do you use Kofax or other vendors to pull that data and make it structured? And before embarking on a journey, you have to figure out what problem you are solving. It's a 3 year, 4 year, 5 year journey. Look at the error rates what humans are making and what kind of error rate the machine, because machine is nothing but the human mind. It's like a child. The more data you give, the more training you give, it keeps on evolving. Lastly, if you look at different processes, right? 10 people who are doing the process at a bank, in the back end, they will have a different knowledge. But it's very difficult to get 10 human beings together to augment their knowledge, but AI can do it. Now, generative AI is a very good example of that. Now, we have evolved from an RPI AI to ML and now generative AI and so on and so forth. This journey will keep on going. But yesterday was a very interesting landmark. European Union became the first landmark body to really pass very strict regulation behind the periphery of AI. This will become a law very soon, and I'm sure other countries follow. Lastly, what I'm going to say is, every product, every service will touch AI in our personal life and in our business life. What we have to look at it, how we are going to use that to our advantage and what business problem they are solving. And lastly, if you look at a bank or if you look at a small platform, which you are augmenting AI to move forward, what you have to look at how you are safeguarding the customer risk and data. because a lot of things are regulatory, right? Healthcare, for example. There was a big case in US, I'm sure all of us know, about the lawyer using ChatGPT and showed it. How is that leading? So I think that's how Atul I will say.
So I think, so for me, in this discussion right now, there's two things that are standing out, right? One is art of the possible. And to imagine the art of the possible, just as an example, I use the example of Claude. So look up this tool, this generative AI tool called Claude as an example. Between March and May of this year, its ability to process data increased by 10x. This is just between March and May. So just imagine, I think that's one takeaway. The second takeaway that you said, Vishal, is use case. Are you clear on the use case? And the fact that this kind of capacity, this kind of ability to look at data, ability to look at both structured and unstructured data that you can leverage. So, Manjeet, you've led very large tech organizations. You were an adopter of talent in LATAM years ago, right? Talk to us about that when you start looking at automation and AI, both success in the past, and then when you think about kind of the pace at which is moving, what other things should enterprises and entrepreneurs think about that would speed up the adoption of such innovation?
So, first off, thanks for having me here on the panel. You know, one of the things that I find, large enterprises move very, very slowly in most cases, but there are always pockets of opportunity. And if you can identify those pockets of opportunity where you can help drive productivity through workflow and automation, you slowly start seeding the idea of how workflow and automation tools can actually be helpful inside the larger enterprise. It's a way to make it less scary than what we're hearing about today, which, and I think I shared with you yesterday, Atul, that AI reminds me of RPA, robotic process automation. You know, 5 years ago, everybody's job was going to be replaced by RPA. That clearly did not happen for a number of good reasons. Now AI is going to replace everybody's job. That's also not going to happen. Instead, these are augmentation tools. They help you become more productive. They help you take out the waste in the process and redirect your energies in those areas where you can maximize impact in the enterprise. The more that you can find those pockets of opportunity, the more these tools will start growing. The challenge with it is everybody thinks these are quick and easy solutions to every problem, and they're not. And again, I use the example of RPA as being a great way to eliminate your entire back office functions, because RPA essentially is going to automate everything. Again, didn't happen, was never going to happen, because most processes actually require some level of intervention. Same thing here with AI. AI could get you to a certain point, but it's not going to basically replace everybody's function inside the enterprise.
Atul, can I add something?
Yeah.
I think one thing which is very important, if you look at an example of insurance, right? And maybe 20 years down the line, if there was a flood in Florida, insurance agents will go and check. But now that evolved into drones. But when they took the image, you use AI and analytics, right, to determine what the claim should be. So taking that example from a banking perspective, right, it has moved to the next level, which is research. How do you do predictive analysis for research to the next level? You have a trade to make. How you can use AI and a human computation to make that trade more effective based on some data and based on some analysis and how it can move forward. So as Manjeet rightly said, you know, the journey of RPA we all know, right? It is just a query doing the work in the back end using SOP, standard operating process. But we are looking for the future. It is the data which can augment the real sense and take it forward.
So let's stick with data for a second, because I want to also talk about human capital, but first let's stick with data. So we found, for example, the reason RPA has not accelerated to the level we talked about or we thought about, right, 5 years ago, is because garbage in, garbage out, right? We'd say that. And so if you don't have clean, accurate data, how do you do that? Steve, talk to us about how you are starting to see, for example, shared services in GBS, which used to really be about kind of managing back offices, but master data management has become a key component of it. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the last 3 GBSs that I've ran, master data has come into the GBS function in all of those. And it's not really about a land grab of you need to have everybody that touches master data coming through GBS. It's more, what's the policies, how do you govern it? Because the governance is really I'd say the most critical piece within there. Getting that control of, and then the cleansing of it, driving towards that accuracy. But you're absolutely right. If you don't get your master data fixed, or be on a journey to fix it, then everything we do on the technology side is going to be irrelevant. As you said, the garbage in, the garbage out. I've seen it, particularly on some of the accounts payable bots that we put in, failed spectacularly because we didn't have the vendor master data right. So it's like you've got to have a double focus on it.
Yeah, I was just reading a number. It said that by 2024, which by the way is 7 months away, right, less than that, by 2024, 40% of the enterprise applications are going to have AI embedded in it, 40%. So now to your point, if any one of us that are doing this kind of work, so for example, in my business Supply Wisdom, which is a risk tech company, AI is embedded in the way we actually provide real-time intelligence. But the question becomes now is, how do you create transparency so your customers can actually trust the AI? So Manjeet, talk to us a little bit about your experience with creating transparency, but also assuring senior management that this is the right path forward.
So transparency is one of the biggest challenges that we have with AI. I mean, even if you start thinking about the generative AI tools like ChatGPT, how do you know that the answer it's giving you is actually correct? Now, in some cases, you know, if you're asking it to tell you about a chapter in a book, you can actually pick up the book and validate that it was correct. But in many cases, you're asking it a theoretical question. And there's a well-known news article out there right now where a set of lawyers actually used ChatGPT to write a brief, and it was horribly wrong, and the judge, you know, called out the lawyers for essentially not doing their job. It's funny on one hand. On the other hand, it was because there wasn't enough transparency in terms of where ChatGPT was getting its data from. And so back to the data and governance question. You know, inside large enterprises, you have very large set of customers. Let's just take one called Walmart. Walmart has multiple entities around the world. How do you know when you ask an AI bot a question about Walmart, is it responding about Walmart Global? Is it responding about Walmart North America, Walmart Latin America, or the Walmart located on 2nd Avenue and 3rd Street in New York City, should it even exist? That's the problem. And if the AI tool doesn't have a way for you to look back and see where it got the input data for the result it produced, it's very hard to take it serious. And so for the question of senior leadership needs to see this in action and needs to be able to track back and validate before they believe. And then once belief sets in, then you're going to go into a trust but verify model. But before that, everything is not trusted and is untrustworthy.
Sorry, Steve.
Yeah, just to build on that, the word trust is the transparency, the make it simple to senior leadership. And if you think of the age group, our first exposure to AI was Skynet, wasn't it? They were going to take over the world, the Terminators, all that type of thing. There is an ingrained distrust in, you hear AI and everybody takes a step back. So you've not only the transparency, but to build that trust, you've got to make it as simple as possible and kind of like de-intelligize it and make it as simple as possible.
Yeah. So we're talking about data and transparency. It makes me think right away that imagine if I'm an entrepreneur, right, and I'm building an application that has AI in it, and I'm talking to enterprises, selling to enterprises. Now what it means is I better have a great understanding of data. And even though my AI is my IP, I need to create transparency. So maybe, you know, I'd love if there's examples or you know, case studies that any one of you can share in terms of, like, how did you enable it? Like, how did you do that where you created that trust by ensuring that, you know, they could have trust in the data and they could actually have trust in the fact that what this tool is delivering that you can audit it, or you can say with confidence that, yes, I trust the results of it.
Yeah. So, Atul, very, very rightly said. I'll just give an example. 1960, if you guys go on your phone and Google, when calculators were launched, all the teachers in the United States, they said, ban it. We cannot trust a calculator. How it is giving the computation 2 into 2 is 4. We are not going to use it, right? And the same is happening about the ethical trust, right? And that's why we have all this legislation being made. But on the back end, any platform you build or in any organization, when you look at a consumer using AI and when you look at a company using AI, we don't care as an individual. But when we become a part of a company, our alarm bells goes differently. So one is your data, from where you're getting the data and how this data is being tested. You be testing as well as how it is being piloted. Because you cannot have a full-blown AI in an organization. You have to start somewhere with a growth trajectory. Then an outcome-based, what is the outcome-based and the ROI you are getting? The third important factor, and I'm sure it relates to Toyota and your organization, and Atul, you're a pro in that, every aspect, when it is touching your customer data, it has to go through a TPRM or a TPO, third-party outsourcing, which sees the fitment of that product, the infrastructure. And then is the hosting, where you're hosting the data. It's in a cloud, prime, or public. So all that is taken into consideration. And what kind of, if in the banking perspective, if it is touching a registry, if you're in a KYC process, right? If you are interacting with a client, can you do it in settlement clearance? I have a Chase account and I have millions of dollars there, right? Can I trust a bot telling me this is their account and you push the button? But you will trust if it is coming from a source you trust. So the source is very important. So all these things you have to take into consideration. Lastly, I will say, if a product is small, it doesn't need to be a Watson from day one. It doesn't need to be a full-blown product. If it solves that problem and it has proved that data that is giving some recommendation engine in the back end and you have done the testing and it has the capability to scale up, I think it's reliable.
So let me jump in also and say, we've got a set of AI products that we developed over the last year. And we took a very cautious approach to AI because there's some regulatory boundaries we have to be careful of in our industry, which is multifamily in North America. So when we did the initial training and labeling of our data sets, we forced the AI tool to do detailed annotation. So we could actually go back to an AI conversation, whether it was via voice, chat, email, whatever, and we got a full transcript with annotations as to where the bot got its data from, so that we could understand how the bot was doing a little bit of self-learning, but also where it was pulling this information from, so that we could figure out what keywords we needed to insert to create those regulatory boundary lines, if you will. It was a heavy, heavy lift. I mean, for 3 months, we had teams of data scientists doing nothing but labeling data. But once we got that, we ended up being much more confident in understanding how the bot was working, essentially how our machine language model was working, where we were feeding it data that was sometimes taking it off track, and where and how it was using the end user's input in a way to format the answer, and where we had to be careful around an innocent question could actually yield to a result that we did not necessarily want to give. It was a highly manual, but in the end, that is what gave us confidence to say, yes, we can release this to the world, and yes, we've got enough back-end knowledge as to how and why the bot was doing what it was doing.
And Atul, one last thing, the replication of the case studies in different environments, that gives the legitimacy. And third is ultimately, I see it personally, in next 3 years, you and I won't be talking of AI here. I think a machine will be judging whether that is ethical or not and making it to the next level.
So maybe just quickly on the case studies from the user. We actually started using ChatGPT on our job descriptions. So as I'm looking to change the organization and new jobs are coming in, we've been using this to actually build a job description to go out to the market with, and they've been pretty accurate. And that has started to build some of that trust and confidence from the internal teams.
So one example I wanted to share is, so when we started leveraging machine learning and other early stage AI, what we realized was that we needed to create trust. And so we created trust by always exposing what the sources of the data were, right? So you could always track back to the very source of the data. It's kind of like, imagine if you were doing farm to table and claiming everything is organic, you ought to be able to track it down to the specific farm to justify that. So that's the first thing, like the sourcing, be able to show the source. The second part that we realized was it's truly, at least for me, it's always been AI plus human. The one thing we found is that even with ChatGPT, it makes a difference the way you ask the question, right? If you say, hey, give me a risk management program versus give me a risk management program for a top 50 American bank or a top 50 European bank, you get a different set of answers. So contextually it matters. So we always think about AI is AI plus human, where humans are part of the context, part of actually improving it. There's a reason why ChatGPT, GPT is now GPT-4 version, right? Because fundamental recognition out of the possible, things get better, but it's the humans that are actually figuring out how to continue to get it better. It didn't create it itself, right? So we talked about data, we talked about transparency to create trust. Now let's talk about one of the biggest reasons why we are all here today, right? Which is this incredible human capital that exists in LATAM and Caribbean. So we'll focus on that rather than the rest of the world. Talk to us about our experiences with RPA and what happened to talent, how we develop talent. Because any surveys that are done about AI automation, the number one challenge or hurdle to greater adoption, somewhere between 60 and 70% of the respondents post human capital, lack of human capital and skills as the number one reason. So talk to us, maybe Steve, kick off with you, is how are you thinking about the human capital equation? Because you are a global company.
Yep.
How are you ensuring that you have the right skill sets, and what are some of the options that you're pursuing?
Yeah, it's kind of getting everybody involved, and the message that we put out there is that bots and AI will not take your job. The person that can use or program the bots and the AI will take your job. So, to Atul's earlier point, human capital is not the piece that's going to go away from there. So it's making sure people are aware of that, they're training up on it, they're being aware of it, but also with the partners that we use on the BPO side as well, and indeed our own digital team, is making sure they have the right talent to come forward. And something that we've really struggled with is getting everybody kind of in, I'll say, one area to help us. It's been a very fragmented approach, either regionally, product-wise, or even market-wise, to actually get after it. So, if I look at Latin America, and I've had a lot of experience, particularly with Colombia, with Mexico, Guatemala, etc., this is a huge opportunity to be near shore to the US companies and to build some of those COEs. And we talked about trust earlier as well, and being able to see these people, particularly on site within the US as well, and helping us through these business problems. So I'll go all the way back to the beginning. Make it simple, know what the business problems is, understand those first, but make sure that you can talk, program the bots, the AI, etc.
Yeah, and from my perspective, the world's best, most efficient, and most productive computer is still living up here in everybody's heads. There is no equivalent today. And it's up to corporations and individuals to try to figure out how best to utilize this fantastic tool that we have. And one of the great things about the advancements of automation and workflow automation is we remove the repetitive from the process. And at the end of the day, most people don't want to do repetitive work. They want to do intellectual work. They want to do stimulating work. So the challenge that I would put out in front of people is, how do you start leveraging AI to eliminate the wasteful parts of your job that you're not interested in doing? And that then frees you up to do more interesting work. That's going to vary based upon the industry that you're working in, and if you're in outsourcing the company that you're working on behalf of. But these are the areas of opportunity. And I think that is what's actually going to make everything become better, more effective, and more efficient through the use of these tools rather than replacing people. One of the conversations I would always have with the head of HR for the enterprises I worked is, it is not about bringing in an automation tool in order to downsize my organization. It's actually bringing in an automation tool so that I can upskill and level up the people in my organization. I actually might need more people after bringing in the automation because there are even more things that we can do in the enterprise. And for the most part, we actually added heads into resources into the organization rather than remove them once we brought in some of these automation tools.
Yep. So, you know, if you look at any organization, 3 fundamental principles: people, process, and technology. And people, human capital, is one of the key points. In the morning, I had a call with Japan on core banking systems. And banks have legacy platforms, Finacle, IBM, and Thought Machine, that is one of the new players, and they are all automated, right? Now, if you look at it, it's not plug and play. You come, you get rid of the legacy, and you just push it, right? So the knowledge sharing and the roadmap is important. But if you look at human capital from a Latin American standpoint, and that was Atul, your question, and I've spent a lot of time here, as you are aware, build captives and, you know, had nearshoring opportunities. I think one is, whatever the companies who are present here, look from an angle of building a domain, whether it is a banking domain, a healthcare domain, or a retail domain, right? Build that domain. And then try to build a COE and try to partner with any big player or a consulting firm, how you can take your services to the players, because the doors are open. Earlier, maybe 10 years down the line, it was, you know, if you're not big enough, the big organizations want to adopt you. It's no longer the same. Big organizations are more open to work with smaller organizations because the millennials, Gen Zs, are bringing that talent and innovation with the older generation think very differently. So I think there is a huge, tremendous opportunity for human capital to open the door and look from a different angle and look AI, not from a problem solving of a particular problem, but any industry. Look at a car dealership, right? From a dealer network, look at a banking from inception to the end, and then try to solve those problems.
Yeah, there's a few things that I heard that I want to reinforce, because often when you are an organization sitting, let's say in Jamaica or Uruguay or somewhere else, you wonder if that Fortune 500 or a Global 2000 business is going to do business with you. The reality is, large corporations, you know, I know Manjeet, in your own experience, and Steve, in your own experience, and even you, Vishal, large corporations are so eager to find the next set of innovation and recognizes that often that's going to come from a startup, early stage company. Also recognizes often that that early stage company may not have the capacity, the capability to support them, and that's where this whole depth of specialization, depth of a use case really matters. The second thing that I think we should all recognize, that while COVID was a challenging time for so many of us, the reality is actually proved the case that remote work, hybrid work actually works, that talent without borders is real, right? I started my first company in 1999 with that premise about talent without borders. And COVID actually, interestingly, really proved the case. What does that mean? That means you could be a 25, 50 person data science shop, or you could be an application that is a small set that you can actually access and take advantage of marketplaces. And the only thing that's stopping you is your courage to actually take that step. Literally, right?
I started my company, I left JP Morgan 28 February, March 1st, 2020. So COVID was an enabler, I would say, in a way, because at that time, you could really, and if you take the data, what we have been talking about, if you have an idea, everybody has ideas, and ideas to become a concept to a product, until I speak to 100 people and test it, you're not going to succeed.
Yeah. So data also shows that by 2026, over 100 million of us in the workforce will have a robo-colleague working next to us. What does that mean? That means that we have to get better not just working on computers or on the internet like what used to be 20 years ago, but actually working with a robo colleague. So talk to us about that part. Like, what does that mean, you think, for the workforce, that you have a robo colleague working with you?
You want me to go first? Yeah. It's nothing. It's a bot or a machine which is augmenting. It's your partner, your colleague, right? But it's no different if you look at operations, right? When we, Atul, you and I have been in the outsourcing world for a long time, and when Jack Wallish started with, I don't know, somebody was from Genpact here, right? Jackis in India in 1998, right? That was nothing. Whatever functions you have, people are doing in a BPO and, doing that. But now you're getting rid of those people and a machine is doing for you, right? It's augmenting. So you're augmenting your computation through a machine, and maybe you will divide and conquer the same task. Maybe the machine will do 100%, or maybe the human will do 100%, and you will augment. But to some extent, I still feel the data, I don't know where this report is from, Atul.
McKinsey Global Institute.
Yeah, I still feel that you and I will still have a job.
Oh no, that's the point. I'm not making the point that it takes away human jobs. Actually, I'm very excited about it. Let me use an example. So our customers are large banks, large insurance companies, right? They have 5,000 to 50,000 plus suppliers, and they're extremely conscious of what is the risk in my supply chain because of any one of those,
Yeah.
right? Right now, somebody has to run a report to understand that and then try to analyze it to present it. Integration of ChatGPT, like instrument, what does it do? You basically ask a question, hey, who's my riskiest supplier today and why? And all of a sudden, all that data that you have resident, that robo colleague is actually now enabling you to figure out where to put your attention. So I'm actually very excited about it. So the question though is, I think much more is, how do we prepare the workforce to be able to be efficient at leveraging these robo colleagues?
Certainly in my organization, it's education. And I'm fortunate, so of my team of about 2,500, the average age is 27. So they've grown, they entered the workplace during COVID. They're used to working remotely, and the fact that a bot is going to be helping them, they see it as help, as augmenting, I think was the word that was used earlier. They're really excited about it. The difficulty I've got is in the older folk that are in the head office and wondering where they can leverage. But I think certainly within the younger group, it's them. We've got to use them as the cheerleaders and the examples and build that trust all the way through the org.
The only thing I'd add to that is, it's partially a change management problem with mostly senior leadership. Senior leadership still does not trust remote work, still does not trust that a machine can do the work as well, if not better. And that's where you really need to focus a lot of the attention. The younger generation gets it. Having lived on TikTok and everything else, Instagram, etc., people have friends globally. So for them, that's like, it's not a big deal. But it's unfortunately the older generation that struggles with that idea, and you're seeing it kind of in the return to work challenges that we have today. So I think it's a portion of education, as Steve just said, but that change management of saying you have to let go, you have to, back to that word, trust. You have to trust your global organization that they will figure out how to be effective. And over time, when I'm old enough to remember when the internet was a thing in enterprises at first, people didn't trust this thing. It was a time waster. Like, people are going to be watching golf on the internet and reading about the golf scores rather than using it as a tool. And we had to do a lot of education, we had to do a lot of training, and we had to show that actually this was going to speed up the amount of work and data gathering that was naturally occurring across the organization. You just needed to give it time and give it time to generate that trust that it actually works effectively. And I think this is the same. And as I said, I am also very, very bullish on the younger generation getting past this all very, very quickly.
So let me tease out some of the key points we were making, right? So we started talking about the cleanliness of data, the ability to track to source, to create trust. we talked about kind of domain expertise, we talked about use case, right? So instead of saying you're a quantum computing company, you may be a cargo optimization company that leverages quantum computing, right? The message is very different. It's the depth of the use case. We talked about talent in terms of how to develop talent. The interesting point that I feel came out of that also was the fact that there's an education of senior leadership that's needed, because our younger generation is actually using these tools already and not thinking of them as AI, just thinking of them as the art of the possible, but senior management needs to be educated. So that's, I think, another takeaway from me. Hopefully, one other takeaway for the audience is that just because you don't have scale doesn't make it a bad idea. In fact, corporations are buying great ideas today. They're experimenting great ideas today. Look, OpenAPI launched ChatGPT, as I said, November 30th, 2022. Morgan Stanley announced that they are experimenting with OpenAI today. That technology is not even a year old. And we have one of the largest investment banks in the world that's saying, I'm exploring the use cases of it. So on this panel, you're not going to find naysayers. You're going to find supporters of the potential and the application of AI. Now, if anybody has a question in the audience, I'm happy to take it, but I do have some more questions, just a couple more questions for my panelists. Go ahead. Shout it out, or here, I'll give you my mic. I know I'm going off script, so.
Thank you. Good morning. I would like an advice from you on what would be the best path for a startup in Latin America to approach to those large corporations.
Perfect. That's exactly why we're here on this panel. So you've bought technologies from smaller companies. So talk to them about how would you encourage they go about accessing your procurement or your buy?
Be brave. I think the biggest stumbling block for smaller companies is they almost talk themselves out of it by saying, we don't have the scale, I don't have the 200 people to support a $20 billion company. Excuse me. But if I look at certainly AI, RPA that's going on at the moment, for me, getting to those GBS shared service functions within the business, because they're the ones that's having to deal with the low value, repetitive, transactional pieces within there. So I think, maybe setting myself up here, your GBS leaders are an absolute way in there, and they've got to take the swings, and they've got that much younger workforce that will be able to talk it a lot better, or a lot easier rather. But first and foremost, be brave and don't think you're not big enough or good enough. The ideas are coming from everyone, and I think that bigger organizations are starting, to Atul's point, they are starting to understand that and see the benefit a bit more.
And I'd add to that, make sure you understand what your product differentiation actually is. As Atul said, you're not a quantum computing startup. You are a logistics optimization startup. Those are two very different things. We'll tune out if we hear quantum computing, it's a buzzword. We tune in when we hear logistics operations optimization, because that we deal with day in and day out. So make sure you understand your true product differentiation. Then the second is, do something that nobody else is doing and offer it to the enterprise. And here's a good example. Many times, again, when we talk about scale, startups don't have the scale. Well, on the flip side, enterprises don't have the expertise, for the most part, to do a lot of product development and engineering on their own. If you come to us with a great idea that resonates and you're willing to dedicate some engineering resources that I can't, you've just stepped to the top of the list of people that I want to work with, because I can't find that naturally out of my bigger partners, Microsoft, Oracle, we can go down the list. So that's the other thing, is really figure out how you can add maximum value to the enterprise using your own resources rather than depending on the enterprise resources.
Right. Vishal, you're going to do the wrap up.
Yeah, quickly I want to add. So the myth is, it's like creating a soccer team. Unless the soccer team wins, the team is no good, right? So your product needs to sell. Your product needs to be adopted. But the myth is, this company is in New York, it's in LA, it's in San Fran, and it is so huge. How do I enter? How do I go? Should I go to procurement? Should I go to business? Do I know someone? So always have multi-channel sales opportunities open through a partner, through your direct sales, right? Then try to find the problem you're trying to solve. It's human capital, it is AI driven, it is a product driven. Then use those channels to convey your point either through your partner or directly. And then again, I think as we have heard, the doors are open, the doors are opening more and more. So any innovative technology it is out there which can solve a customer problem, which can help the organization to reach out to their customer better, I think there is a huge, tremendous opportunity. Whether you're in India, whether you're in Costa Rica, whether you're in Jamaica, it does not matter at all.
Thanks, Vishal. I'll just leave you with a final word. When you think about organizations like Connect America's initiatives like that, don't be afraid, use them. It's a great way to connect with buyers and be relentless. Vishal, Manjeet, Steve, thank you so much. They'll be around for a little bit, so please come and talk to them. Thank you.